Greetings again and welcome to Tai'Shar Manethrin, a Wheel of Time podcast. I am Will.
I'm Sam.
And once again, we are here to talk about one of the books in the series, The Great Hunt, which, Sam, you were saying of at least the first trilogy, this is your favorite.
Oh, yeah. This is a great book. I'm not going to say it's my favorite of the whole series overall, but I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah. And rereading it, I too was kind of like, yeah, this is really good. And it's not even that it's just so much better than The Eye of the World, but it really gives you a much broader scope of the world of the Wheel of Time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that was exactly what I was thinking as well, that, both books have sort of a MacGuffin, a great quest, an artifact or an object of sorts that they're questing after. And so in that sense, they're, follow a lot of fantasy tropes, but like you said, this one expands the world. You get the idea that Jordan really in this book knew where he was going, I think he'd done a lot of world building, just sort of, taking notes, understanding where he was going when he wrote this book, then when he wrote The Eye of the World.
Yeah. At the same time, I did note a handful of times, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to them all, that I think there must have been changes made later. Well, I'll just say one of them that I noticed that I thought was kind of funny was the mentioning of the three oaths. When they talk about the way the three oaths are administered in this book, Nynaeve mentions that they stand inside a large ter'angreal.
Well, interesting, as opposed to the oath rod.
Right. The oath rod isn't mentioned. So that was just one little nitpicky detail.
Yeah, okay.
But to be fair, and I imagine super fans would argue, well, Nynaeve is the narrator, and she wouldn't know.
Unreliable narrator, right?
Right. Yeah. So
maybe so. I mean, you could chalk that up to a lot of things in the first book, where like I was saying in previous podcasts, where they just don't get into the way, the mechanics of the magic system at all. And it's like, well, it's because the characters we're seeing the perspective of have no idea.
Right.
So
exactly.
There maybe you could certainly make that argument. And I think in this, just to get a tad off topic, there's a series by a guy named Patrick Rothfuss, The Name of the Wind. I don't know if you're familiar. But that is one where people have looked into those books and just claimed that it was an unreliable narrator to kind of explain away all sorts of inconsistencies. And I don't know, that's not a very satisfying answer to me, unless it's really clear that that's what the author was going for. And I'm not sure that in this case, I don't think that would probably be the case.
Yeah, I mean, in reality, yes, we can make it work by saying unreliable narrator, but
it's a cop out.
Yeah. But to be honest, let's just accept it. More than likely, he just changed the method, because he realized probably that it needed to be something portable. It needed to be something that could be carried around later.
Yeah, and also to distinguish it from the ter'angreal that the novices walk through to become accepted.
Exactly. So right up front, we have the prologue, and this prologue is so funny to me because it refers to a dark friend social.
I was going to say, I love that. That's just the greatest. It's just, you imagine them standing around, drinking coffee and having little name tags.
Served at a dark friend social. What kind of hors d'oeuvres do you have?
Oh, man.
Does it have to all be really macabre themed snacks?
Yeah, like skull shaped cookies and that's
right.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Like that. That's just funny. Before we get any further, we should mention there will be spoilers for The Great Hunt, obviously.
Yes. Okay, fair enough. I enjoy the idea that Ba'alzamon is talking to these dark friends, and whenever Ba'alzamon is talking to Rand, he's pictured as having, eyes and mouth of fire. Right. So I don't know if I'm picturing, him standing there around the social with, eyes of fire or maybe even blackness. He's almost never pictured as just looking like a normal dude. I'm sure he can, but he does seem like the sort of character who is gonna have some sort of guise, and they may go into what he looks like there. But it is just an interesting mental image. Generally, Ba'alzamon as a villain to me is I keep keep expecting him to like cackle after he says something.
Yes.
Exactly.
He is. I mean, he is kind of crazy.
Yeah, he is, because he's been. Yeah, because right. Yeah, as the books go on, we do see that he is. Maybe it started out as a guise, as a put on kind of persona, but over the millennia, it seems as though he sort of just kind of adopted it as reality.
Right. He kind of had trouble determining his persona from who he really was, and that's kind
exactly
of where that came from.
The other thing is, so this is from the perspective of a man called Bors.
Yes.
And we don't find out who a man called Bors is for another book.
Yes, exactly.
It drove me nuts. The whole book, I was like, who's Bors? Are we going to see Bors?
I really, and I'm frankly, I don't understand why we.
I don't either. It made me think it was other characters repeatedly. At first, I was like, oh, it has to be Jeffrey Bornhold. It's like, all right, you think, okay, it's a White Cloak. Who's the White Cloak? We are seeing whose perspective of Jeffrey Bornhold. So the whole book, I was waiting for it to be him. So
right, yeah,
but no. By the end of the Great Hunt, we know conclusively it's not him.
The whole part of that narration is going out of its way to tell you the man called Bors.
Right. It's not his name. It's not his real name. It just goes by Bors.
Man who calls himself Bors.
It's his made-up name, I guess, is his dark friend name.
Right. I mean, it's right.
Apparently they have. Then that's another thing. It's like, do they have dark friend names? Like, that's not something we generally see in other books. Like, they don't.
Right. Yeah, those little like red "Hello, my name is."
Right. Yeah.
Hello, my name is the man who calls himself Bors.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, that would be kind of hard to fit all on one name tag. The first time I read it, I did not fully grasp what was going on, and I feel like reading through it again, I appreciated it more, of understanding that it was just Dark Friends. It wasn't
exactly.
I was confused about, like, are these like the Forsaken we've heard about, or?
Right? Are they the Forsaken that are like in disguise, for example? But yeah, later we realize no, they're definitely not, because the vast majority of the ones who are mentioned later show up in this book. Although it's like, he's more subtle with his dark friend. Jordan is more subtle with his dark friends in book 2 than in book 1. In book 1, we were lousy with dark friends, and they were like really obvious dark friends. And these were a little bit more subtle, I would say, a little bit more undercover. Moving
on from the prologue, we come to Rand on the wall of Caldara, in the capital city of Shinar, where we left him. He's practicing sword forms
with Lan.
Yes, and this is really our first introduction to the way the sword forms work.
That's a good point. Yeah, I guess in the first book, he may have been trained by Lan, but it just like with the power, it didn't really go into a lot of detail.
Right, and so you get all of the fun names of the different sword forms. And I just got to say, it's actually one of my favorite components of Jordan's writing throughout the series. When I have attempted to write a fight scene, I try to go into this great detail of each,
like a blow by blow. Sure.
But when he writes it, he doesn't even worry all that much about that. He just gives you the names of these forms,
which is perfect, because then you can imagine in your head exactly what he's going for. And it might not be exactly what he's going for, but you have a good mental image.
Right. And what you picture is your own kind of version of it, and it makes it awesome. It's like the sword fight version of not showing the monster. It's kind of like,
exactly,
allows your imagination to make that fight into whatever it's supposed to be. So instead of saying he swiped up and came over, it's like he performed
moon over the water or whatever.
Right, wind over the mountain, or
My favorite instance is just a little bit later. My favorite instance of this, and I won't go too deep into it, is when Lan says, "Cat crosses the courtyard."
I was going to bring
get a perfect mental image of that.
Yeah, that's Cat crosses the courtyard comes up several times in this book, and actually shows back up in later books too. And it's actually not even really. It's a walk. It's not a
right. It's a way of walking with like your back straight and your head held high, and it's just like I don't care about any of you. I am walking.
Right. This arrogant saunter. And yeah, it's intended kind of as a way to enter into a fight with a certain, I guess,
With
kind of
assertiveness, confidence. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Love it.
So, that's definitely one of those.
The other thing about that scene that I really liked was how Lan talks about Rand's sword. How that's a heron marked blade, but it's not just any heron marked blade. This is one that was forged by Aes Sedai during the Trolloc Wars.
Right.
That was really interesting.
Yeah, one of the last power wrought weapons before
exactly. And of course, Lan also has the blade of the Malkier kings. So. Right.
Yeah, there's you got two power wrought weapons right there. So
right.
And cool. Which the first time I read it again, that was just something that completely right over my head because I was
me too.
Like, oh, what does that mean? For those that are reading through the first time, this is a bigger deal later on. I feel like I can say you're going to see a power wrought weapon happen.
Exactly.
At some point. And so the idea of using the power to heat the metal, to align the matrices of the weapon at the atomic level, kind of to make it basically almost completely impenetrable, almost
as we see.
Yes, almost. And basically only the power can undo it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
So it's very sharp and doesn't need to be sharpened, doesn't need to be cleaned. It just is an awesome sword all the way around. We in Shinar we get our first taste of a different culture, really, from because we've been in Andor for almost all of the Eye of the World, except for the last maybe third of the book. And even then, we only stopped through Shinar very briefly at the end of Eye of the World. But in the beginning of The Great Hunt, we spend some time talking about the culture of Shinar, which is very much affected by the fact that it sits on the Great Blight. And
it's Borderlands. It's sort of honor shame culture of their warrior fighting culture. That's their whole purpose is to defend the lands of men from the Blight.
And you have phrases like "May peace honor your blade" and
Tai'Shar Shinar.
Right, that's where we get Tai'Shar Shinar, Tai'Shar Malkier, Tai'Shar Manetheren, and all of those.
And the top knot, they all have like a top knot. Warriors.
Yeah,
this which is a great image. Like I definitely am picturing sort of a pseudo samurai kind of look.
Can really see this culture being very interesting to see on TV. Hope we get to.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I really hope we get to the Great Hunt at least in the TV show because so many great scenes, so many, like you said, cool imagery. Shinar is a great example of that.
Yeah. So you get introduced to Agilmar and Ingtar and Masema. And,
these are characters that will have a huge impact in later books, like Masema, who's sort of in this book is just he has a few lines, throwaway lines here and there, but later he has a much bigger role.
Yeah, Masema is just like he's this guy that doesn't like Rand. That's about
which is like half of the Shinarans, especially in the quest to the later quest is
right. He's a very forgettable,
just kind of surly,
So Rand is having this kind of funny experience because since he has Al in his last name, Althor, they all think that he's royalty because in the Borderlands, the Al is a denotation of a king.
Which of course Moraine only encourages because she wants him to embrace his destiny and later, like when he leaves, she packs him a bunch of silk shirts and stuff. And that's all. He doesn't want to wear a silk shirt.
and you have.
I mean, I don't want us to wear a silk shirt either, but for different reasons.
Yeah, they make a whole wardrobe basically of clothes for a lord that he is essentially forced into wearing, and all at the same time, you have all these different Shinarans that are. My lord, and he's constantly telling them, I'm not a lord.
Yeah. I mean, really, he spends this whole book denying who he's going to be, denying that he's anyone other than a shepherd. But he is a different character in this book than he is in the first book. You know, he's not just this wide-eyed shepherd anymore. You know, he's a little more worldly. He's used the power even though he doesn't want to. You know, but so it's interesting to see. You know, he's not the character he's going to be in the later books. I mean, the later books, you know, he's a lot more all about, you know, I know about what my fate is, but I'm going to face it. In this book, he's very much trying to deny it, really.
Yeah, here at the beginning, you also begin with a little bit of a conflict between he and Matt and Perrin.
He was just kind of a jerk to them because he wants to protect them, and you know he wants them to be away from him because he thinks he's gonna, you know, they're gonna be hurt if they're around him, and he doesn't do a very good job of driving them away, but he is just kind of a jerk.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the end of Harry and the Hendersons where, you know, John Lithgow is saying, "Go away, we don't want you here," but it's for his own good.
Yeah, of course. Egwene sees right through it.
Because Egwene and Nynaeve, unlike the boys, they know that he is a man who can use the power. He's a man who can channel. And so they know why he would want to drive people away.
Yeah.
And Matt, it's funny thinking about how Matt changes later, because at the beginning of this, he is the most bothered by Rand wearing the nice clothes. And
right. You know, honestly, I just want to say this from the outset. I do not like Matt in this book.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Because he's either has the dagger and he's a jerk, or he loses the dagger and he's jonesing for it. And so you can sort of blame his behavior on the dagger or the lack of the dagger, but it doesn't make it any easier to deal with. It's just like, man, shut up.
Well, he hasn't really become the gambler yet.
Right.
Whereas, you know, Perrin basically becomes the Wolf King character, not fully, but he really, you know, is enough to know who he is in the first book.
His changes are more subtle than Matt's, are a lot more dramatic, really.
Yeah.
In terms of just kind of his general character. Right.
There's also, the Amerlin seat shows up for the first time.
Right. That's a really fun scene. I mean, just of course, there's she comes in and almost gets shot by an arrow and all that. But the scene where Rand is brought to see her is really a fun scene. Only my favorite, it's one of my favorite parts of the book is when Lan comes and finds Rand and is like, well, you should have left already, but since you didn't, you're going to go face the Amerlin seat like a man.
Right. Gives him all this advice.
Right. Dresses him up like a Malkir or Shienarid borderland soldier and tells him how to walk and how to stand and what to say. And, you know, he says, when you bow to the Amerlin seat, and Rand says, oh, okay, like the Queen's Guard bow to Queen Morghese. And Lan kind of gets a smile and goes, yes, do that.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So he presents a very different kind of person than I think Moraine is expecting in that moment. She's still expecting the shepherd.
Right.
And
exactly.
Rand is showing he's not quite the same guy anymore. And some of that's thanks to Lan. Some of that is genuinely he has changed over the last several months.
Yeah. Exactly. And I really just this comes later, but there's a scene with Lan and Moraine where Moraine's basically like, what the heck, man? Why did you make Rand into this borderland soldier?
Right.
And Lan said, you know, I didn't want to present a puppy to the wolves. I wanted him to, you know, be a wolfhound, you know, so he doesn't just get killed.
Exactly. Yeah. I like how Moraine says it. She's like, I mean, it didn't really mess with my plan.
I would have told you to do it, but you did it without me telling you.
Right. Yeah. Which, I mean, that is very typical Moraine. Like, she's not going to act ruffled, but she's just going to be like, you know, that was a little bothersome. Why did you...
And I love, this was a line that Lan says to Rand when he's in the midst of it. He says, I'm probably wasting my time, but I have nothing better to do. It's cool to see kind of Lan being in Rand's corner and, you know, where he's typically just, you know, this kind of implacable warrior. But clearly he's in Rand's corner.
Lan and Nynaeve's relationship has progressed. And
right.
So I think he's feeling a bit of an obligation to value the things that Nynaeve values and set up Rand for success when it comes to these different political situations that the shepherd had never been in before. but he wants to see him do well and not be made a fool of and not be made into somebody's lackey.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Nynaeve. In that same scene, again, this is later in the book. We may get to it. I don't know. Between Moiraine and Lan, it's from Moraine's perspective, which we don't get a ton of Moraine chapters, excluding New Spring, of course. But you have a moment where she feels a twinge of jealousy, and isn't because she has the hots for Lan. It's just she says, they've been through so much together, and it's like the first time she's ever seen like a crack in his foundation. And she doesn't want to lose him as a warder and as a companion and as a friend more than anything else. It's an interesting kind of perspective from her end.
Yeah, I think it's something that anybody who has had a friend who has like fallen deeply, madly in love with somebody all of a sudden kind of feels.
Sure.
That you're like, man, I thought we were best friends.
We had this thing, right? Yeah, and with the the Aes Sedai warder relationship, it's like even more so like. Can a warder marry somebody else? Like, I guess.
Yeah. So the Amerlin seat is the first time we get to see Siuan Sanche and kind of find out about the complicated politics that have been happening in the White Tower. That maybe there was a time not too long ago that the Amerlin seat really was able to kind of lay down the law and be respected, but that has kind of come to an end recently. Right. Is kind of the drift we get.
And I love that there's some wonderful foreshadowing here where Moiraine and Siuan are talking, and she said, and Siuan says, even if Lyanna found out what we're planning, we could be stilled. And they just have this moment of like, oh God,
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah, that would be terrible. And so you have an introduction to their relationship too, where you kind of
I love that. Yeah, it's like this past about them where they were accepted together, but they've intentionally created some distance between them so that they can carry out this plan to find the Dragon Reborn.
Right, that they happen to be present during the prophecy.
Yeah, Guitarra Moroso. That was so cool. It was during the Aiel War against Cairhien after Laman cut down the tree, and like the eye is like because I guess. Tar Valon is right on the slopes of Dragonmount. The Aes Sedai were out healing the wounded because, the Aiel came right up to the Shining Walls. And Guitarra Moroso is the keeper. And they were just sitting in the study and she like stood up and had a foretelling and the dragon has been reborn. And so that's when they sort of hatched their plans.
Yeah. And then she fell over dead.
Right. Yeah.
That'd be a heck of a way to go out. Right.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm basically going to predict the end of the world here. And then die. Yeah. So yeah, you kind of get a little flavor for the fact that they're besties kind of and have been close. And you also get Siuan I think grew on me as time went on because the whole business of her being the opposite of Moiraine when it comes to their background. Was actually
Cairhien nobility,
right? Favored for the crown after the Aiel War, and that she the only reason why she didn't end up queen is because she didn't want it. And
whereas Siuan is like a fisher woman from Tyr who has all of these like metaphors of fishing.
Right. Yeah.
It becomes a running joke at some point about nets and lionfish.
Right. Her curse is fish guts.
Right.
And she keeps referring to the Black Aja as like silver pike and all these everything is like related to fish and all this like metaphors, and a fisherman doesn't go out in the morning unless he all this different
right
stuff.
And at one point I think it's either Min or Lyanna that's like, would you stop it with all the fish talk?
Yeah.
Man, that's later and they're in some extenuating circumstances, but yeah.
After we have the meetings with the Amerlin, and once again Rand is told, you are the Dragon Reborn. There's nothing
right, and he has a flashback to like Tam talking in it, muttering while he's in a fever dream about finding the baby on Dragonmount. And so he realizes what they're saying is true, but just denies it, with every ounce of his being.
Right. Continues to not want to be a man who can channel and everything. I think there is something that is kind of appealing about somebody who, of course, doesn't want power. And
Yeah, you look at all the false dragons. You look at the ones that proclaim themselves, and they wanted the glory and grandeur. And this is a man who can channel, who everyone says is the dragon reborn. He's like, man, I just want to go home. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be able to channel.
Yeah, a friend of mine talked about not liking the way that Aragorn was played in the Peter Jackson trilogy because they felt like he wasn't in the books, that he wasn't as humble, that he was a little more ready to be king. And first of all, I didn't read him that way, but
yeah, I didn't either.
Second of all, if there was kind of a change to be had there, I think that would have only been positive.
Oh yeah, everyone likes that. It's a quality you want in a leader, someone who doesn't want it that much or not at all.
Right, somebody
more likely to be in it for the right reason, so to speak.
Yeah, I think this is also the first time we get introduced to Lan's mantra. The duty is
heavier. Death is lighter than a feather, and duty is heavier than a mountain.
Yes,
sounds like something a Klingon would say.
It does sound a little bit if it was said like this,
Right, exactly.
Duty is heavier than a mountain. And I love that phrase, and it becomes so important in the later books as there's moments where it's like, hey, death is the easy choice.
Right.
The duty and doing what you should do is much harder than just giving up, basically.
Yeah, that comes up again at the end of this book at Falma with the Shan-Chan Soldam, and I think it was either Elaine or Min. It's like, maybe these women should die for what they did, what they've done to these women who can channel. And Nynaeve is like, maybe they should, but that wouldn't be justice. She talks about being a wisdom in the two rivers and how like she would sit in on she would render justice with the women's council, and how that, men would be quicker to pass judgment or whatever, but that she would, or the women's circle would seek to find true justice, and that true justice wouldn't necessarily mean death for these Soldam sort of things. So I think it comes up a lot of times. I mean, it comes up with Ingtar later, so it's definitely a theme of this book, I would say. There is such a thing.
Along with that, and this came up a little earlier than where we are now, but I think it's as good a time to mention sheathing the sword.
Yes. Something Lan mentions to Rand, originally.
When he's in the training kind of montage moment where he's going through the different sword forms, one of the things that Lan mentions is that sometimes you have to sheathe the sword, and Rand's like, well, I know how to put my sword in my sheath.
Right. I know how to not stab myself in the gut when I'm putting my sword.
He's like, no. Sometimes you have to be willing to take a
to
stab,
die,
and a fatal wound possibly to gain an advantage. And
that comes up repeatedly later in the book. Yeah, at least twice, maybe twice.
Well, as the great Russian playwright Anton Chekhov said, if you talk about sheathing the sword in the first act, then you have to sheath.
You better sheath that sword at some point.
In the third act, yes.
Yeah, and I love at one point when Rand is like just practicing the forms, with the Shi'Nar sitting around, and he's doing whatever the one is where you're like standing on one toe, and it's something about a crane. And Ingtar or Uno, I think it was Ingtar, is like, man, if you use that in a real fight, you're gonna get stabbed. He's like, just for balance. That's what Rand says. Right. He's like, whatever you practice is what you're going to do. Lots of fun foreshadowing.
I really like, of course, the interaction between all the different Shi'Narans, but we'll get into that, I think, more in a little bit. So the big thing else that's happening in Shi'Nar before we leave is, of course, Padan Fain is in the dungeons. And
creepy as all get out.
Yes, and we get to see him down there. Egwene brings Rand down, and she's all like, he's been really nice lately.
What the heck, Egwene?
And so, like, she comes up and, like, she even mentions, like, the guards are ruder. And it's like maybe he's having an effect on like even the guards around him, and he brings down, and of course he is super creepy and like
yes he is.
No, Randall Thor.
Such a weird character.
I will get you. When you talk about. One of my favorite things to do, and I know you'll be right with me, is how D&D has the alignment of like chaotic good.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Neutral, true neutral, like lawful, neutral, lawful,
right.
evil. Yeah.
I feel like Padan Thane is like the chaotic evil.
Right. Like Barrett Jair would be like lawful evil.
Exactly. And, whereas like the dark one is like
evil.
Neutral evil.
The far right.
Yeah. So I think that's always interesting to see. Like like the children of the light do represent in general that lawful evil that justify what they're doing based off of a structure of rules and a way of living versus Padan Thane. It is kind of like, all right, let's just burn it all down.
Yeah, he's the Joker pretty much.
Exactly. It's later in the book, but one of my favorite little funny moments is a perspective chapter from Padan Thane's perspective when he is talking to some of the Shan-Shan, and one of them is like scolding him for not speaking to the High Blood the right way. And he says, at that moment, Thane decided how that man would die. And I was just like,
love it.
Yeah,
I'm fan. Yeah. The thing that bothers me is how he ends up, in these high-ranking places, surrounded by high-ranking people, and they don't catch on to how messed up he is. Like, or maybe they do, and it's just the fact that he has information that they want. Like, later he gets in the White Tower, for crying out loud. He's involved with the White Cloaks. And it's like, especially the White Cloaks are all about dark friends everywhere. Like, do you not see this evil looking dude? Like,
right.
Just take a moment here. Like,
right. It's like the jealous girlfriend meme. It's like the White Cloaks are, have the girlfriend that says like killing dark friends, and then it's like turning around and it's like Padan Thane with information. Ooh. Yeah.
Ooh. Yeah. Yes, I know exactly what you mean.
So he's super creepy, and like, hey, everything's going to burn. I think maybe he does say something about Tomon Head at that point for the first time or something that Rand. And anyway, it's not long after that we have sudden Trolloc attack.
Right. That happens more often than it should. Guys, come on. Like this happens in all these places where it should not happen.
It's kind of funny. One time I was writing a comedic piece with some friends, and I kept writing into the narration, "Sudden goblin attack," and that's the way I felt.
Yeah, and I enjoy how Jordan always he takes an opportunity to describe a different Trolloc, and not every time, but like there's at one point there's like one that has like an eagle head.
Yes,
I thought was a fun image.
Right? Yeah, I hope they're able to do like different variations on the
song. Yeah, they better not all be like like bulls or something. The stereotypical one I picture has like like the head of a bull with like the big horns, and it's just massive.
Right.
But there's so many others. There's like wolves and, like I said, eagles. I mean, just everything under the sun.
Lots of different crazy.
Bebop and Rocksteady.
Yeah, I read that thing that was going around the internet about how like Japanese scientists recently got the okay from the government to make a human animal chimera or something, and I saw somebody posted, "Do you want Trollocs? Because this is how you get Trollocs."
Exactly.
Anyway, so after this Trolloc attack, it turns out that Padan Thane has been broken out, and now the horn of Valir has been stolen, and the dagger.
Right, Padan Thane's dagger from Shadar Logoth. I can never say that right.
Yeah, whatever. Padan Thane's been spirited away. So now there's this whole thing of, well, we need the dagger so we can cure Matt, and we need the horn because it's a MacGuffin. And
I'm so glad you said MacGuffin, because it is the MacGuffin. All right, and I just want to talk a minute about the horn. And this is, I don't think this is potentially too much of spoilers. I won't talk about the ending yet or anything, but it's interesting to me that it's not like a Tirangriel. It's not an Angriel, obviously. It's the Horn of Valir.
Right.
It's like it's been around since the creator or something. And it's not clear at all to me what exactly it is or where it came from. It's just the Horn of Valir.
I hadn't thought about that, because it's funny how often like the Aes Sedai, anything out of the norm, they're immediately like trying to test it to find out what it is and how it came to be. And
usually there's some explanation like, oh, okay, this is a terangrial. We don't know, who made it or how it's made or whatever, but this is a terangrial. But not with the Horn of Valor. Everyone just accepts, oh yeah, the Horn of Valor, of course.
Yeah. Calls great heroes back from the dead. That's no big.
Which we will get into that.
Yes, absolutely, we will. So yeah, they take off with the Horn, the Dagger, and Padan Fain, and they're heading off. And then Rand is conflicted because he's like, "Well, I kind of want to just yeet out of here and be done with it all, but I also do want to make sure."
I want to. Yeah, he was thinking of Matt for sure. He was like, "I don't want Matt to die without this dagger, because they need to take it and him to have it separated in Tar Valon." Yeah, so that's his like whole motivation at this point.
So he goes, even
though he was a jerk to Matt earlier,
right? So he goes along, and that's the point at which you mentioned earlier that when he has his stuff packed up, he thinks he has like normal shirts and everything, but when he gets out on the road, he realizes he's got nothing but noble wear. Mm-hmm. And we haven't mentioned up to this point, and he's a pretty big part of this book, but Loyal, of course, has been there the whole time.
Oh yeah, Loyal has been loyal and has been in, and he's a very large part of this book. Heck, he's on the cover of this book.
Yes, he is mentioned when Rand is trying to run off Perrin and Matt. That Loyal it says something about his tufted ears looking sad or something. I pictured just like this giant puppy dog.
Yeah, there's a lot of description of his tufted ears in this book, particularly when they go to Stedding, is it Sofu or Shanghai, whichever one he's not from, and his ears are quivering wildly.
Yes, I think it's Sofu, because I think he's
Sofu,
from Shanghai.
Yeah, he's from Shanghai. That's right. Okay, yeah. And so when he sees Aerith or whatever for the first time, his ears are quivering wildly.
Yes, and I love the way Michael Kramer does Loyal's voice in the audiobook. That
Rand.
Yeah. And I mean, how often in the book, if they make the whole season, the whole series, I want them to include every instance where Loyal just says Tabirin.
Knowingly.
Just something crazy happens and he's like,
Tabirin.
And it's just like, oh, okay. So Loyal's with him too. And then we're introduced to Huron, the
sniffer.
The sniffer. This is one of those things that's like, here's a sniffer, and they go through explaining what that is.
Right.
It's nowhere else in the books. Like, is there a sniffer except for here?
I think of it kind of like men's talent.
Right.
It's the talent with a capital T. It's just one of those, and it's like, it's not clear to me at all why those exist.
Right.
Or what they are.
They have nothing to do with the power, but at the same time, they don't want to tell Aes Sedai because the Aes Sedai won't believe it has nothing to do with the power. So they would like grab them and pull them into the White Tower and want to kind of run tests on them, I guess, somehow, whatever that is.
Exactly.
But yeah, Huron's a sniffer. He can smell violence.
He's also a bit of a thief catcher, I think, because he's got the sword breaker, which I always confuse him and Julian Sandar.
Right.
The Tyran thief catcher.
Yes. Not to be confused with the thief taker.
Right. Oh, jeez.
That's a completely different thing. So Huron is leading the charge on where the Trollocs and Padan Fain have gone because
by smelling the violence. And I love his description of like what things smell like, what the type of violences smell like. It's fun.
How he can figure out what was done there. And one of the first stops is a place where something truly horrific has happened. Like a lot of people have died, and it's that town where Rand like goes in and gets like caught in this weird loop thing of where he sees the last moments of the family that lived there for a few moments. So,
I forgot about that.
That's one of those. Weird. That's one of those strange things that was like, what was that?
It's like it's like it's not Teleron Riyadh. It's not a dream exactly. It's just
he just is like reliving the last moments of the family before the Trollocs came in, invaded. And then we have them seeing I think it's one of the Murdral has been strung up and killed, and that is all terrifying because they're like, who and how could a Murdral be killed that way? And of course, it was
Fane.
Yes, and so it's crazy. And then you have Rand revealing to Matt and Perrin that he can channel.
Oh yeah! Wow, yeah. I hadn't read that part recently, so I've continue.
And that's so obviously that's a pretty big moment, and that's kind of where Matt kind of comes back for a little bit from his being angry with Rand, and Rand kind of explains that he was trying to do the right thing and kind of trying to scare him off a little bit.
It's weird. They fell asleep next to a portal stone, and I don't know, I guess he channeled in his sleep. I don't know. I'm not really clear on that part.
Well, it's described in the book as he embraces the void, and it feels strange. This was the moment where he later would realize that the void is where he accesses Sidene.
Right.
And he hasn't realized that yet. So when he was trying to fall asleep, he just went into the void to kind of fall asleep and said there was a weird kind of glow there or something. And that's, so he somehow manages to channel into sleep.
Right, which is, it's weird because later he has trouble, channeling channeling enough of the power to activate the portal stone. I think at one point, Varen says, "Oh, if I tried to activate a portal stone, it would burn me out because I couldn't use enough of the power." So it's just a fun image that as he falls asleep, Rand channels enough of the power to activate this portal stone, but it would have been more than Varen could possibly channel.
Right. Man, he missed an opportunity there. He's like, "Are you serious, Varen? Because I could channel this much in my sleep."
At that point, he still didn't want to channel. So
right, yeah, I know and also would be very uncharacteristic of the entire feel of the book. To have that kind
but
of
it would be awesome.
Yes.
No, but I love this. I love this part, and it really is one of the first scenes that it is one of the things I love about this book, which is all of the alternate worlds we get. And there's so many of them. I mean, in between this portal stone, and this is the one we see the most in depth, but the Tirangriel that Nynaeve walks through to become accepted, the other portal stone that Rand and Varen and the Shienarans go through. I mean, and that's the one where we see so many different worlds.
Right.
And so, it's just really, I love how he fleshes out this kind of the same idea as many pieces of fiction have done, the many worlds that could be, and especially we get to see this one kind of in depth, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of The Magician's Nephew from
totally.
Chronicles of Narnia, when they get into all these different worlds and everything, and how some of them are new and some of them aren't even populated with any living things yet.
Right. I love that. And I love how that, that book, of course, leads into The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And we see how Narnia is created from this world that was dying.
Right.
It was a really cool moment.
Yeah. And so, in a similar way, it's like this is one of those what if kind of worlds that isn't fully formed because it's not
right.
It's
a what if. It's very much a what if. It's like, what if the Trollocs won the Trolloc Wars and killed everybody?
And then each other, basically.
And killed everything. Yeah. And the only thing left in this world is frog bears. Which I love. At one point he describes them as like bear-sized frogs. And I mean, I know that's not exactly what they are, but that is the mental image I have now, and it is perfect.
Yeah, I played bass for the Frog Bears.
Yes.
Wow. That does sound a little bit like a band.
It does.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Frog Bears.
Would you rather fight a bear-sized frog or a frog-sized bear? Right?
It's a good question. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, Really, I think a frog-sized bear would be pretty. If it was like a fully grown bear, but like small, but it was like coming after you, like that could be pretty terrifying. Like,
it could be, yeah. I mean, he could do some damage.
Yeah,
especially if it's like a polar bear. Those guys. Those are the ones that actually hunt humans. Just think of a tiny polar bear running around your house. It's
we know terrifying. This is the kind of thing that our listeners are listening for. So I'm glad we're discussing that.
Absolutely.
So in this alternate world, there is basically very little of anything, and they encounter a Grom, which is, as Sam says, a frog bear, and
they have three eyes, and they may be reptilian, but it's Rand's words, not mine. He describes them as frog bears, so that's what I'm going with that.
But they see one fighting the most beautiful woman that anyone has ever seen ever.
And it's just so funny to me that there's just woman who's just wandering around this alternate world, and they never stop to really question how did you get here? And it's 100% because she's so hot.
Okay, here's my headcanon though,
fair enough.
And I think there's an argument to be made that this is more than headcanon, because there are so many times in the book where it gives the impression that her appearance changes slightly.
Sure, right. Where she has like an illusion on herself or something.
Maybe she's using some either like compulsion or something.
Yeah, I thought about that. I really don't, and this is my headcanon, I don't think it's compulsion, because I feel like she really wants to win Rand over, because she loves him. She loves Lews Therin, and true. So maybe she would use compulsion on her Huron. I don't know if it would work on Loyal, but so I definitely could go with it's an illusion. She's making herself more beautiful. That's right. So I could definitely, but it just, to me, it's just 100%. They're like, oh my gosh, she's so hot.
So let me just say a little sidebar here in regards to Celine and who we discover she is later, which we'll get to. I feel like there are so many times in all the books where a character is just described as unreasonably attractive. And
for sure.
Just
there's too much of that.
Yeah, there's just way too much of that. And the other thing
you feel like a little bit like you're on a CW show,
Right, yeah, everybody, just everybody.
Everybody's beautiful.
Right. And to the point that it's it's almost nobody is, because everybody.
We need more ugly people. I mean, we need more people described like Bail Damon and Land.
Right.
Where they're just not the stone-faced or rotund. And
right, exactly.
I love it when he says a handsome woman.
Yes, they describe more handsome than beautiful. That's how they describe Siwan. And but here, Celine is just described as just the most beautiful woman. Even Loyal is like, you are the perfect example of human beauty and all this. And so my problem with it isn't just the fact that happens so often. It's more just the reality that there is no way that they can cast anyone that everyone's going to say, yeah, she's the hottest.
Oh, she's them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's just, especially for someone who needs the range of a character like Celine. I mean, that's a
right.
tall order.
And exactly. And I think of when the movie Troy came out back when we were maybe in college, Brad Pitt, year of college, and Diane Kruger played Helen. And Diane Kruger's very attractive. Don't get me wrong, but I remember immediately going, but is she 1,000 ships attractive?
Right, exactly. No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm just like, I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe not.
That's the trouble with the whole thing of there being somebody
build it up so much,
right? That everyone is like, oh, she's the most gorgeous. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe they could get Blake Lively to play her. That's.
Play all of the characters like that.
Yeah, she's the only one that I've never heard a guy say that she isn't one of the most beautiful people they've ever seen. It's just funny to me that this happened, and along with what you're saying in regards to how do they not immediately question what's going on. I feel like Celine is so obviously evil throughout the whole thing.
Oh yeah,
I mean, if. The only thing that can make it more obvious is if they mentioned her twirling her mustache somehow. I just and to the point that I almost picture Celine with a mustache twirling it. Just you know, yes, yes, you know.
Indeed.
Because she immediately is like telling Rand about how, you could have the Horn of Valir yourself and
be the most powerful man in the world.
Yes.
Me by your side.
Yes. Like, and we could rule the galaxy as father and son. And
and then Baalzamon turns around and says the same thing, but he has eyes and mouth of fire, and so it's
so he's like, father of lies. Right.
It's not quite the same effect.
But that is so true of any guy. I feel like if there's very obviously evil dude saying something, then it's like, well, yeah, I'm not going to do that. Hot girl, though,
It's like, well, I'll listen to what she has to say.
Yeah. I mean, at least it's not going to hurt anything. I mean, let's at least sit back and have a conversation. That's not going to do any bad.
Yeah, you said Blake Lively. For some reason I picture Liv Tyler. I don't know. I know we've already had our casting discussion, but and I don't know if she was right at all. But yeah, that's my mental image for some reason.
No, I could totally see that. But Selene is the one who kind of helps fill in the gaps. Loyal knew a little bit about the portal stones,
right?
And she helps kind of explain further exactly how they work. And
it's like, how does she know?
Right.
And like later, Rand, I think, is telling Varen's like, I would very much like to read the book that this young woman had. And it's like, it shouldn't have been it doesn't exist anymore. How does she have a copy? And it's like, why doesn't Rand stop and go, wait a minute, how does she know this stuff?
Right, exactly. And it's like, all this very obscure stuff from the Age of Legends. It's like, maybe she's too attractive to be anything worrisome. I hope whoever they have for Selene, I think it would be good to get somebody that it's like a little bit like the casting of Jake Gyllenhaal in Spider-Man: Far From Home, where you are like, well, you at the beginning you're like, no, this couldn't be an evil person, this couldn't be a bad guy. They're you're all, even if you read the comics, you're like, oh, but clearly they're changing it up. This,
Yeah.
Meanwhile, back with the Shinarans, everybody wakes up to find that Purin, who has been leading the
is gone,
along with Rand and Loyal.
But wait, we have another sniffer.
Yes, very fortunately.
It's like, no one stops to question that. Like,
right. Yeah, Perrin pulls Ingtar aside and he's like, look, I need you to be cool about this, but
I can talk to wolves.
and Ingtar is like, all right.
He's like, if you can take me to the Horn, I don't care how you do it.
Yeah, and that's the beginning of when we kind of start to see Ingtar maybe his hunger for the Horn is not healthy.
Right. No, I really, having read this a second time, and then how recently, kind of a third. I really enjoyed Ingtar's character. Sort of knowing the whole range of how his story progresses. It really is. It's kind of interesting to see how he ends up. But it becomes a lot more clear from that point that it's like, yeah, he's got some ulterior motives.
He starts to say, I must have the Horn, and the Horn will be mine, and I will have it, and all of these things. He gets much more, and it's really more about him possessing the Horn than getting
personal
it back.
Glory.
Yeah, it's like, maybe this guy. Are we sure we even want him to have the Horn? Is that even what we want at this point? So they manage to hear from the wolves enough that they can kind of follow a trail. And this is also the point at which Perrin hears for the first time what the wolves call Rand. He doesn't know at the time that it's Rand, but the wolves refer to him as Shadow Killer.
Right. Lots of cool names for Rand, for the Dragon Reborn. Lots of cool names, and for a variety of, for the Dark One.
Yeah.
Sightblinder. I love that.
Sightblinder, yeah. I think it's around that time that we have the scene with the Moraine and Lan, and they're kind of stopping over at a kind of a little library with two Aes Sedai who kind of have been away from the White Tower for a long time.
Adelius and Vandine, I believe.
Yes, and they're researchers, and they have gathered a lot of info over the years, and so Moraine is stopping through to kind of do some research of her own. And there's a conversation there that is kind of important in regards to what is going to happen with Land in future books.
Right, with Myrell, yeah.
Where Moraine reveals that she has already made a plan to pass her bond to another Aes Sedai without talking to Land first. Just tells him straight up,
right? Yeah,
going to happen.
A green. I love it. I love how they describe the green Aja. So Myrell is a green who I think she already has 3 orders, or maybe she has 2, and he'll be her 3rd. But it's just always funny, all the Ajas have these stereotypes, and one of the stereotypes is that the Greens just love men, and they bond extra orders.
Yeah, they're super flirty and all that. They're
the ones. If anyone's gonna marry a warder, it's gonna be a Green, and so it's always a.
So.
And at the same time, they're the battle Aja. It's kind of interesting that they think of themselves as the battle Aja, but everyone else is like, oh yeah, they just have extra orders.
Right, exactly. They just really like dudes.
There's a scene where Loyal and Ingtar are talking about, they're like traveling through Hadan Merk. And they're like, and Ingtar is talking about how the nations have kind of like evaporated. Remember, have we already passed that?
We may have. I can't.
Okay, so
remember.
I just want to talk briefly about it for a minute. It's interesting. It reveals a little bit about Ingtar's character, because he talks about, they're traveling in this wilderness that used to be this nation, and how it just sort of dried up. It couldn't kind of hold on to its land anymore. And he says, and Loyal and he are talking about this, and he says, at one point you could ride across the land, and you would cross from one border of one nation into another. And now there's all this wilderness between these nations, and it's because they can't hold on to their territory anymore, and all the nations are sort of falling apart. And it's just sort of he kind of has a bleak image of humanity and the future of the nations. And it just kind of reveals something about Ingtar. It's just a little bit more about Ingtar, about kind of what his perspective is.
Right. Yeah. Back in the Elf's world, we get to another portal stone.
Right, and they get out and go to Kyrian.
Right. And before reaching Kyrian, however, they see...
Oh, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it. The Chodan Kal.
Yes, exactly.
And it's a great example of how Jordan... Okay, maybe he didn't know exactly where he was going at this point. Maybe he did. I don't either give him too much credit or not enough. I don't know. It wasn't in the man's head. But the fact that he already had this artifact... that he sort of plants a flag in this book to say that this artifact exists is pretty cool, because this particular Sangreal plays a huge role in the end of the series.
Right.
13 books later, or 12 books later, or whatever.
So yeah, it is revealed in this book to be the largest and most powerful. Was it a Sangreal or Turon?
Yes, Sangreal. Yeah, definitely the strongest.
And one of 2. There's another one.
There's a male one and a female one.
And the female one is buried on Tremalking.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're keys. They're like, I guess they're basically Tirangriels that are like, that allow you to channel the power that is stored in that is channeled through that Sangreal, which Rand later acquires those key.
Right.
Which becomes a big MacGuffin in another book.
Right. Yeah. So the idea with that, it's, just this huge statue with a glowing orb, and
it's like Rand gets close to it and he can like feel it. And Celine's like, we should go.
Yeah.
We should get away from this.
Which is interesting to me, because that seems a little counter to what she's been up to this point. It almost seems, what is Celine's end game here?
For sure.
Because Chodan Kal is kind of something that becomes a bit of a temptation for Rand later. So
he sort of thinks like, well, maybe I should just go ahead and challenge the Dark One now with this.
Right. It almost seems like a bit of uncharacteristic anyway of Selene, as we come to know her later, that she wouldn't be kind of like, oh yeah, go check that thing out. And especially since the access key have been required for it to be useful at all.
Yeah, I wasn't clear on whether or not, like, since he was standing right next to it, if he put a hand on it, if he he could channel using it. Maybe it's just the fact that she realized that he had no idea what he was doing yet, and she just thought he would, die if he tried to use it.
Yeah, well, that's a good point.
Because later, she takes steps to try to help him learn how to use his power, so to speak.
Right. So also somehow at this point, they're able to find Pan Fane's camp and go and sneak in, get the horn, get the dagger.
Right. I love how he has the dagger like lying on top of the horn case, and like none of the Trollocs will touch it.
Yeah.
And they draw all the Dark Friends are like, oh, we're not gonna touch that thing. Whereas Rand just like grabs it, didn't care. He puts it in the case, which apparently shields it.
Right. It's too evil.
Yeah.
So they're able to then take that to Kyrian. And I think that's a good place to pause for a moment.
Yeah, I think so.
We're going to catch up with Kyrian in our next episode because we want to spend 2 episodes talking about the Great Hunt because we love it so much. And
it's a good one.
If this works out, we may do this with more of the books going forward because there is enough in every book to talk.
Most definitely.
For 2 hours or more. So we're going to pause there for now and say, hey, join us again in a couple of weeks, and we'll be back to discuss more of the Great Hunt. Meanwhile, you can always like and subscribe and share and review. Give us a review. If you don't like us, tell us why. And actually,
Please.
There's a little thing where you can take a survey that tells us about you so we can get an idea of who's listening. That's a link in our description. So do all those things. Share it with your friends that like Wheel of Time. We'd be glad to hear from you. So use that review to let us know how we're doing. In the meantime, Tai'Shar Manetheren.
Tai'Shar Manetheren.